The champagne flute felt like a shard of ice in her trembling hand. She wasn't supposed to be here among the glittering elite, but a last-minute staffing crisis had forced her onto the floor of the Starlight Foundation gala. Then she saw him. Her ex-husband Mark, looking like a king with his new wife Chloe draped on his arm in a diamond-studded gown. They cornered her by the service entrance, his voice a venomous whisper. "Still playing the help, Amelia. I guess this is as close as you'll ever get to this life again." Chloe smirked, but before Amelia could even breathe, a deep, commanding voice cut through the air, a voice that silenced the entire ballroom. "Actually," it said, "she owns it." The Starlight Foundation Gala was the beating heart of the city's social scene, a place where fortunes were pledged and reputations were made or broken under the light of 1,000 crystal chandeliers. For Amelia Rosewood, it was just a job. 3 months after her divorce from Mark Sterling, her once thriving event-planning business, Rosewood Events, was hanging on by a thread. Mark, with his family's deep connections, had made it his personal mission to poison the well, whispering to their old network that Amelia was unreliable, unstable, a shadow of her former self. So when the head coordinator for the gala came down with a sudden flu, Amelia, who had designed the floral arrangements as a subcontractor, was asked to step in and manage the floor. It was a humiliating step down, trading her clipboard as a business owner for a headset as a temporary manager, but rent was due. She tried to make herself invisible, a ghost in a simple black dress, ensuring waiters moved seamlessly and speeches started on time. She was good at this, at creating flawless evenings for others. It was her own life that had shattered into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. The divorce had been brutal. Mark hadn't just left her, he had erased her. He'd told her she was nothing without the sterling name, that her talent was a cute hobby he had indulged. He left her for Chloe Vance, an heiress whose fortune made the Sterling's respectable wealth look like pocket change. Amelia was checking the placement of a centerpiece when she felt a familiar, chilling presence behind her. "Well, well, look what we have here." Mark's voice was the same, smooth, confident, and laced with the casual cruelty she now recognized so clearly. She turned slowly, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. He stood there, impeccable in a Tom Ford tuxedo, a smug smile playing on his lips. On his arm, Chloe looked her up and down with a bored expression, her diamond necklace catching the light and blinding Amelia for a second. "Mark?" Amelia said, her voice tight. "Chloe." "I'm surprised to see you here," Mark continued, his eyes scanning her simple dress with disdain. "Though I suppose someone has to work these events. I hope they're paying you well. You must need it." Each word was a carefully aimed dart. He was performing for Chloe, for anyone who might be watching, reinforcing the narrative he had created. He was the victor, and she was the spoils of a lost war. "I'm managing the floor tonight," Amelia said, forcing a professional calm she did not feel. "If you'll excuse me, I have work to do." She tried to step past them, but Mark blocked her way. "Not so fast. I want you to see what a real success story looks like. Chloe and I just closed on the penthouse at the Olympian, the one you used to dream about." He paused for effect. "Her father paid for it as an early wedding gift." Chloe let out a little laugh. "It's a bit small, but it has a lovely view of the city. All the parts we own anyway." The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crawled up Amelia's neck. She could feel the eyes of nearby guests turning towards them, sensing the drama. This was what Mark wanted, a public spectacle of her failure. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "Listen to me, Amelia. You need to accept your place. You were a nice little project, but you were never meant for this world. Still playing the help, I see. I guess this is as close as you'll ever get to this life again. It's pathetic." The word hung in the air, pathetic. It shattered the last of her composure. Tears pricked at her eyes and her breath hitched. She was trapped. A lowly staff member being dressed down by a major donor and his powerful fiancé. To fight back would be to lose her job. To stay silent was to let him win, to let him carve that word onto her soul. Her world narrowed to his sneering face, Chloe's triumphant smirk, and the blur of the glittering crowd around them. She was about to break. And then everything changed. A voice deep and resonant with an authority that seemed to vibrate through the marble floor sliced through the tension. "I think you're mistaken." Amelia looked up, startled. A man had moved to stand slightly behind her, a protective shield she hadn't realized was there. He was tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes the color of twilight, and a face that belonged on the cover of a business magazine. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, but it was his presence that commanded attention. The air around him felt different, charged with power. The low hum of conversation in the ballroom seemed to dip as people turned to look. Mark's smug expression faltered. He clearly didn't recognize the man, but he recognized the aura of influence. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The man's gaze was level and cold as steel. It swept over Mark and Chloe, dismissing them in an instant before landing on Amelia with a surprising softness. He gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. "You were just speaking about my wife," the man said, his voice calm but unwavering. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby guests. Mark's jaw literally dropped. Chloe's perfectly painted lips parted in shock. The man gently placed a hand on the small of Amelia's back, a gesture of both possession and support. He looked directly at a stunned Mark Sterling. "I believe you've met my wife." He repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Amelia Devereaux." The name Devereaux landed in the ballroom like a sonic boom. Julian Devereaux. The Devereaux. He wasn't just wealthy. He was a titan, a legend. A reclusive genius who had built a tech empire from the ground up. His net worth was a figure discussed in hushed, awestruck tones. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and his presence at any event was a major coup. And he had just called Amelia, the struggling event planner, his wife. Mark Sterling's face cycled through a comical spectrum of emotions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, and finally a sickly green shade of pure terror. He looked from Julian's unyielding face to Amelia's equally stunned one, his brain failing to compute the reality presented to him. "Wife," Mark stammered, his voice a squeak. That's not possible. She's Amelia Rosewood." Julian's grip on Amelia's back was firm, grounding. "She is," he agreed smoothly. "Amelia Rosewood Devereaux. We prefer to keep our private life just that private. But I won't stand by and allow my wife to be harassed by her former acquaintances." The way he said former acquaintances made it sound like a terminal diagnosis. Chloe, for her part, was pale. The diamonds around her neck suddenly looked like cheap glass. She tugged on Mark's arm, her eyes wide with panic. The name Devereaux meant more than money. It meant power on a global scale. Mark had just insulted the wife of a man who could buy and sell his entire family lineage with a single phone call. The whispers in the crowd were now a roaring torrent. Cameras previously focused on the stage were discreetly turning their way. Julian seemed oblivious to it all, his focus entirely on Amelia. He leaned down his voice, a low murmur meant only for her. "Play along. We're leaving." Amelia, still reeling from the shock, could only nod. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, but the immediate overwhelming feeling was one of dizzying, unbelievable relief. The look on Mark's face was a balm to a wound she didn't even know was still bleeding so profusely. Julian straightened up, addressing the gala organizer, who was now hovering nearby, looking panicked. "My wife isn't feeling well. We'll be making our donation on the way out." He then fixed Mark with a final chilling glare. "I suggest you enjoy the rest of your evening. It may be the last one you enjoy for some time." With that, he guided Amelia away from the scene, his hand never leaving her back. They moved through the parted crowd like royalty, the whispers following them like the train of a gown. Amelia didn't dare look back. She could feel Mark's terrified, incredulous gaze burning into her. They were silent as a silent valet brought a sleek black Bentley to the front entrance. The door was opened and Julian helped her inside. The interior was a cocoon of soft leather and silence, shutting out the world of the gala instantly. As the car pulled smoothly into the city traffic, Amelia finally found her voice. Who are you?" she asked, though she already knew the name. "Why did you do that?" Julian Devereaux finally looked at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the passing street lamps. "My name is Julian Devereaux, and I did that because I needed a wife. And as of about 5 minutes ago, so did you." Amelia stared at him. "You needed a—" "I don't understand. That's insane." "Is it more insane than your ex-husband publicly humiliating you while you're trying to work?" He countered, his tone even. "I saw the entire exchange. It was clear you were in a difficult position. I offered a solution." "A solution? By pretending to be my husband? You've just created the biggest gossip story of the year. By morning everyone will think we're married." "That is precisely the point," he said, turning to face her fully. The car was gliding through the city, a silent observer to the unfolding drama within. "Amelia, I don't do things without a reason. I didn't just happen upon your little drama tonight. I came to this gala specifically to find you." This new piece of information was even more shocking. "Me? Why?" "I'm familiar with your work," he explained. "Rosewood events. Before your recent difficulties, your designs were innovative. Your execution was flawless. You handled the tech sector launch for CyberSynth last year. It was brilliant, understated, elegant, and technologically seamless. I know talent when I see it." Amelia was speechless. Someone of his stature had noticed her work. "I am in the final stages of a merger with a very large, very traditional Japanese conglomerate, Matsumoto Corp." Julian continued, his voice all business. "The CEO, Mr. Kenji Tanaka, is old-fashioned. He believes a stable family life is indicative of a stable business partner. He is notoriously wary of what he calls the unsettled bachelor lifestyle of Western CEOs. My marital status has become a sticking point." He paused, letting the information sink in. "Mr. Tanaka is in town for 2 months to finalize the deal. He values discretion and tradition above all else. He would be impressed by a man who married for love and talent, not for public status. A man who married someone like you." Amelia's head was spinning. "So you... What? You want to hire me to act as your wife?" "I want to propose a partnership," he corrected. "A business arrangement. For the next 2 months, you will be Amelia Devereaux. We will attend a handful of events together, host a dinner for Mr. Tanaka, and present a united, stable front. In return for your time and discretion, I will do 2 things. First, I will clear all your outstanding business and personal debts. Second, I will make a capital investment into Rosewood Events that will not only save it, but position it as the premier event planning firm in the city. I will personally see to it that your calendar is filled with A-list clients for the next 5 years. He named a figure for the investment that made Amelia's breath catch in her throat. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of. It was freedom. It was security. It was the ultimate revenge on Mark. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could have any woman in the world. Most women in my world want the publicity." He said, a hint of weariness in his voice. "They would leak the story, try to leverage it. You, on the other hand, have every reason to want to be discreet. You have a reputation to rebuild, and as I said, I admire your work. You are professional, poised under pressure, and you have a grace that cannot be bought. You were perfect." The car came to a stop in front of a towering, impossibly sleek residential skyscraper. This was his home. "You don't have to decide now." Julian said, his voice softer now. "But your ex-husband's friends are already checking their phones. The story is already breaking. By morning, the world will believe you are my wife. The only choice really is whether or not you want to be paid for it." He looked at her, his twilight eyes searching her face. "This is your chance, Amelia. A chance to take back everything he tried to destroy. All you have to do is say yes." Amelia followed Julian out of the car and into the private elevator, a silent mirrored cage that whisked them upwards with dizzying speed. Her reflection was a stranger, a woman in a simple black dress, standing next to one of the most powerful men in the world on her way to his penthouse to discuss a fake marriage. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, and Amelia gasped. It wasn't an apartment. It was a kingdom in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space, revealing a breathtaking 360-degree panorama of the glittering city below. The decor was minimalist but luxurious, all clean lines, rich textures, and priceless modern art. It was a space designed for someone who owned the view, not just rented it. "Can I get you something water wine?" Julian asked, his voice echoing slightly in the vast open-plan living area. "Water would be great," Amelia managed to say, her voice small. As he moved towards the sleek kitchen, she walked towards the windows drawn by the sea of lights. This was the view from the Olympian, the building Mark had just been boasting about. Julian's penthouse was clearly at the very top, looking down on all the others. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. He returned with 2 glasses of water, handing one to her. "So," he began, getting straight to the point, "what do you think?" Amelia took a long sip of water, trying to gather her thoughts. "I think you've put me in an impossible position." "I've put you in a powerful one," he countered. "Right now, your ex-husband is probably hyperventilating. Every person at that gala is scrambling to figure out who you are. Tomorrow, you will be the most talked-about woman in this city. You can either be the subject of a confusing rumor, or you can be the enigmatic, brilliant wife of Julian Devereaux. The choice is yours." He was right. The narrative was already written. He was just offering her a co-author credit. "If I do this," she said slowly, testing the weight of the words, "there have to be rules. A contract." A hint of a smile touched Julian's lips. "I would expect nothing less. I had my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, begin drafting an agreement this evening." He gestured to a large mahogany desk in the corner of the room where a slim leather briefcase sat. "This isn't something I decided on a whim, Amelia. I've been considering this problem with the Matsumoto merger for weeks. When I found out you were the talent behind the cybersynth launch, and then learned of your situation with Mr. Sterling, the pieces fell into place. You were the perfect candidate." He retrieved a thick document bound in a professional cover. "Let's discuss the terms." For the next hour they sat on a large, comfortable sofa overlooking the city and went over the contract. It was meticulously detailed. The public front. They were to present as a deeply private couple who had married secretly 3 months ago, shortly after her divorce was finalized. The story would be that they met through a mutual acquaintance in the tech world a year prior, and had a whirlwind romance they kept out of the public eye. Living arrangements. For appearances, she would move into his guest wing. It was a suite of rooms larger than her entire apartment, complete with its own living area, office, and balcony. She would maintain her own apartment, but this would be her official address for the duration of the contract. Public appearances. A schedule of required appearances was outlined. 2 more charity galas, a private dinner party at the penthouse for Mr. Tanaka, and a weekend trip to Julian's estate in Napa where Mr. Tanaka would be a guest. Personal knowledge. They would need to know the basics about each other to pass scrutiny. A dossier on Julian's life career, likes and dislikes, was attached. He would expect her to provide a similar one. No intimacy clause. A crucial point. The contract explicitly stated that the relationship was to be purely platonic. There would be no romantic or physical entanglement. A breach of contract on either side would render the agreement null and void. The compensation. The financial details were even more staggering on paper. The initial investment in her business, the clearing of her debts, and a substantial personal stipend for the 2-month period. An additional discretion bonus would be paid upon the successful signing of the Matsumoto merger. The exit strategy. At the end of the 2 months, they would issue a joint statement announcing an amicable separation, citing the pressures of their demanding careers. A generous severance package and a lifelong non-disclosure agreement were built in. It was a cold, calculated, brilliant business deal. "This is thorough," Amelia said, placing the document on the glass coffee table. "I don't believe in leaving things to chance," Julian replied. "What about my friends, my family?" "Your circle is small, according to my research," he stated not unkindly. "Your parents are deceased. You have one sister in Oregon and a handful of close friends. The story for them can be the same as the public one, a whirlwind romance you kept secret to protect it from the fallout of your divorce." He had researched her. The thought was both unsettling and strangely reassuring. This man didn't make careless moves. Amelia looked out the window again at the city that had felt so hostile and unforgiving just hours ago. Mark had tried to shrink her world to trap her in a small, dark box of failure. Julian Devereaux was offering her the keys to a kingdom. It was a gilded cage, perhaps, but the view was incredible. And from this height, people like Mark Sterling looked very, very small. Revenge was a bitter pill, but survival was sweet. And this was more than survival. This was a resurrection. She turned to face him, her decision made. "Okay, Julian, I'll do it. I'll be your wife." He nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Good. We have a lot of work to do. Our story begins now." He extended a hand. "It's a pleasure to be married to you, Amelia Rosewood Devereaux." She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and strong. For the first time that night, the ice inside her finally began to melt. "The pleasure is all mine, husband." The word felt foreign, a costume she was trying on for the first time. But as she looked at the determined man beside her and the new world at her feet, she had a feeling she might just grow into it. The next 72 hours were a blur of calculated transformation. Amelia's life was systematically dismantled and reassembled into the image of Mrs. Devereaux. A team of discreet professionals descended upon her small apartment. Movers packed her essential belongings for the move to the penthouse, while a personal shopper, a chic woman named Isabel, arrived with racks of designer clothes, shoes, and jewelry. Mr. Devereaux's instructions were clear, Isabel said, her eyes appraising Amelia's current wardrobe with polite horror. "Elegant, understated, powerful. Think timeless, not trendy. You are not a billionaire's arm candy. You are his partner." Amelia stood in front of a mirror wearing a navy blue sheath dress that probably cost more than her car. It fit perfectly. It made her look taller, more confident. Looking at her reflection, she saw a hint of the woman she was supposed to be. The most challenging part was the crash course in being Mrs. Devereaux. Julian was a demanding tutor. They spent hours in his penthouse office, a space filled with books and cutting-edge technology, memorizing the details of each other's lives. She learned about his childhood in Seattle, his estranged relationship with his father, his love for classic literature, and his allergy to shellfish, a critical detail for their public dinners. He in turn learned about her. He listened intently as she spoke of her passion for design, her dream of opening a floral studio within her event business, and her quiet life before Mark. He was a surprisingly good listener, asking insightful questions that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. "Your ex-husband was a fool," he stated simply after she recounted how Mark had dismissed her business ambitions. "He mistook a diamond for a stone because he was too lazy to wipe off the dust." Their first public test came 4 days after the gala. It was a smaller, more intimate affair, a fundraiser for the city's art museum, hosted by the formidable Eleanor Vance, Chloe's aunt. It was a calculated move on Julian's part. They would be walking directly into the lion's den. "Are you ready?" Julian asked as they stood in the penthouse foyer. He looked devastatingly handsome in a dark charcoal suit. Amelia was wearing a deep emerald green gown that shimmered under the light. On her left hand was a new heavy weight, a stunning square-cut diamond ring. Julian had explained it was a Devereaux heirloom, which only added to the story's authenticity. "I'm nervous," she admitted, smoothing down the silk of her dress. "Remember what we practiced," he said, his voice calm. He gently took her hand. "We are a team. They will be watching for any sign of weakness. Don't give them one." He paused, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "And Amelia, you look beautiful." The compliment, so simply delivered, sent a surprising warmth through her. She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Okay, let's go." The moment they stepped out of the car at the museum, they were met with a flurry of camera flashes. The story of the reclusive billionaire's secret marriage had exploded. They were the biggest news in the city. Julian navigated the press with practiced ease, his hand securely on Amelia's back, a protective and possessive gesture that spoke volumes. He answered one or two questions with vague, charming statements before steering them inside. The atmosphere in the museum was electric. Every head turned as they entered. The whispers were audible. Amelia felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. She kept her chin high, a small, serene smile on her face, just as they had rehearsed. They found Mark and Chloe almost immediately standing with Chloe's aunt. It was an unavoidable collision. Mark looked pale and anxious, while Chloe's smile was brittle. "Julian, darling!" Eleanor Vance trilled, air-kissing him. Her sharp eyes then raked over Amelia. "And this must be the woman of the hour. Amelia, is it we are all just utterly shocked. You kept this so quiet." "We believe some things are too precious to be shared with the world," Julian replied smoothly, his arm tightening around Amelia's waist. Amelia extended a hand to the older woman. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Vance. Julian speaks so highly of you." It was a lie, of course. Julian had referred to her as a venomous old socialite. But it was the right thing to say. Mark couldn't seem to look Amelia in the eye. "Amelia," he mumbled. "Congratulations." "Thank you, Mark," she said, her voice even and cool. There was no trace of the trembling woman he had cornered 4 days ago. "It's amazing how quickly life can change, isn't it?" The barb hit its mark. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Chloe stepped forward, her eyes glittering with malice. "It's just incredible. I mean, how did you two even meet? Amelia was always so busy. At home." The insinuation was clear. She was a simple homebody, not someone who moved in Julian Devereaux's circles. Before Amelia could respond, Julian gave a low chuckle. "I have a passion for investing in brilliant minds. I was captivated by Amelia's work on the cybersynth project long before I was captivated by her. Talent is the greatest aphrodisiac, wouldn't you agree?" He looked pointedly at Chloe, who had famously never worked a day in her life. The insult was so sharp, so elegantly delivered, that Chloe was left speechless. For the rest of the evening, Amelia and Julian played their parts to perfection. They mingled, they smiled. He would lean in to whisper something in her ear that made her laugh. She would touch his arm affectionately when he was speaking to someone. From the outside, they looked like a couple deeply in love and comfortable in their own private world. Later in the evening, as they were admiring a painting, Amelia spoke in a low voice. "You're very good at this." "Deception is a necessary skill in my line of business," he murmured back, his eyes on the canvas. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," she confessed. "Seeing the look on their faces, it helps." "Good," he said, "because the real test is yet to come. Mr. Tanaka arrives in 3 weeks. This is just the dress rehearsal." As the night wound down, Julian guided her to the terrace overlooking the museum's gardens. The air was cool, and the city lights twinkled in the distance. "You did well tonight, Amelia," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it all evening. "You were poised, intelligent, and convincing." "I had a good teacher," she replied, a genuine smile touching her lips. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, not as business partners, but as two people sharing a quiet moment away from the crowd. The line between the performance and reality seemed to blur just for a second. She saw not just Julian Devereaux, the billionaire, but Julian the man. There was a loneliness in his eyes that mirrored her own. The role of Amelia Devereaux was a fiction, a carefully constructed lie. But as she stood beside him on that terrace, Amelia felt more herself than she had in a very long time, and that was the most dangerous deception of all. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of curated appearances. Amelia and Julian became the city's most fascinating couple. Paparazzi followed them, gossip columns breathlessly reported on their every move, and insiders fabricated stories about their secret romance. Through it all, they maintained their story with flawless precision. Amelia, funded by the Devereaux Capital, was relaunching Rosewood Events. She hired a small, talented team and secured a chic new office downtown. For the first time, she was working not out of desperation, but out of pure passion. Julian never interfered, but his name alone opened doors that had been slammed shut in her face. Contracts started pouring in. She was becoming a success in her own right, separate from the Devereaux name, and the confidence it gave her was intoxicating. Julian, meanwhile, was preparing for the final negotiations with Mr. Tanaka. The pressure was immense, the deal worth billions. At night, he and Amelia would debrief in the penthouse's library, going over their day. These sessions became less about rehearsing their story and more about genuine conversation. She would talk about a difficult client or a breakthrough in a design concept. He would vent about the complexities of the merger or share a frustrating detail about his board of directors. They were building a real friendship, an alliance forged in the fires of their mutual deception. Amelia found herself admiring his sharp intellect and his surprisingly dry wit. He, in turn, seemed to appreciate her resilience and her no-nonsense perspective. But their carefully constructed world was not without its threats. The first crack in their facade came in the form of a gossip columnist named Beatrice Vance, a woman known for her sharp pen and her ability to uncover the most deeply buried secrets. Beatrice also happened to be Chloe Vance's second cousin. Beatrice's columns started subtly filled with praise for the city's new power couple. But then the tone shifted. She began planting seeds of doubt. How did no one see this romance blossom, she'd write. For a man as private as Devereaux, this marriage seems uncharacteristically public. She started digging into Amelia's past, interviewing disgruntled former clients that Mark had undoubtedly pointed in her direction. The second, more direct threat came from Mark himself. Humiliated and furious, he was looking for any way to discredit Amelia. He couldn't attack Julian directly, that would be career suicide. But he could try to tear down Amelia, hoping the entire edifice would crumble with her. He started a rumor that Amelia's new success was entirely funded by divorce money she had hidden from him, painting her as a conniving gold digger. The stress began to take its toll. One evening, Amelia was in her new office working late on a proposal when Julian's head of security, a stoic man named Thomas, appeared at her door. "Mrs. Devereaux, Mr. Devereaux sent me to escort you home. It's late." "I'm fine, Thomas. I just have a little more to do," she said, exhausted. "With respect, ma'am, a photographer from the social scene has been parked across the street for the last hour. Mr. Devereaux would prefer you weren't photographed looking exhausted and leaving the office alone at midnight. It doesn't fit the narrative." Frustration bubbled up in Amelia. "The narrative?" She snapped more harshly than she intended. "Of course, God forbid I look like a real person who actually works for a living." She regretted the words instantly, but the damage was done. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. When they arrived, Julian was waiting in the living room, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. "Is there a problem, Amelia?" he asked, his voice low and tense. "No, Julian, everything is perfect in our fake little world," she retorted, the day's stress spilling over. "I just forgot for a moment that every second of my life is now a performance. I can't even be tired without it being a breach of contract." "This was the agreement," he said, his eyes hardening. "Did you think it would be easy? Did you think Mark and his cronies would just roll over and accept it? Beatrice Vance is trying to prove you're a fraud, and you looking like a real person is exactly the ammunition she needs." "I am a real person," she shot back, her voice rising. "With a real business that I am trying to run. I am not just a doll you can dress up and put on display for your Japanese investor." The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp and ugly. It was the first time they had fought, and the intimacy of the argument felt more real than any of their staged affections. Julian's jaw tightened. He put his glass down with a heavy thud. "You think that's all this is to me? You think I went to all this trouble just to put a doll on display?" He took a step closer, his towering presence filling the room. "I invested in you, Amelia, not the act. In you. I saw your talent when your own husband refused to. I've given you the tools to rebuild, but you're the one doing the work. Don't you dare suggest I don't respect that." His voice was raw with an emotion she couldn't quite place. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something that felt hurt. Amelia's anger deflated, replaced by a wave of shame. He was right. He had given her this chance. He was under just as much pressure as she was, if not more. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking at the floor. "I'm just tired. Tired of hiding, tired of the whispers." He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I know." He walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "I've been living a version of this my entire life, Amelia. My father always said my life wasn't my own. It was an asset of the company. Every decision scrutinized, every relationship a potential liability. It's a lonely existence." It was the most personal thing he had ever said to her. She came to stand beside him, their reflections captured in the dark glass. Below them, the city was a tapestry of anonymous lives, full of real love and real struggles. "This is harder than I thought it would be," she admitted quietly. "The best things usually are," he replied. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Beatrice Vance is a problem. Mark is a problem. They're looking for cracks. We cannot give them any, especially not now. Mr. Tanaka arrives next week." He reached out his hand, hovering for a moment before he gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The simple touch sent a jolt through her, an unexpected spark in the platonic space they had so carefully constructed. His fingers brushed against her cheek, and for a breathless second their eyes locked. The no-intimacy clause of their contract seemed to be screaming in her mind. He pulled his hand back as if burned a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He cleared his throat. "Get some rest, Amelia," he said, his businesslike tone firmly back in place. "We have a dinner to plan. It needs to be perfect." He turned and walked towards his wing of the penthouse, leaving her alone with the city lights and the frantic, traitorous beating of her own heart. The facade hadn't just cracked for the public. It had cracked for them, too. And Amelia was terrified to see what might slip through. The week leading up to Mr. Tanaka's arrival was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Amelia threw herself into planning the dinner party, every detail curated to perfection. She worked with Julian's chef to create a menu that fused Japanese and American cuisine, and she designed the floral arrangements herself using Ikebana principles of minimalism and form that she knew the traditional CEO would appreciate. It was her work, her talent on display, and she was determined to make it flawless. Julian, watching her work, was deeply impressed. He saw her orchestrating his household staff with a quiet authority and a kindness that earned their immediate loyalty. She wasn't playing the part of the lady of the house. She was embodying it naturally and effortlessly. The night of the dinner, the penthouse was transformed. Soft lighting, fragrant cherry blossoms, and the gentle sound of a koto playing from a hidden speaker created an atmosphere of serene elegance. Amelia, in a stunning, high-necked crimson dress, looked every bit the gracious hostess. Mr. Tanaka was an older gentleman with sharp, observant eyes and a warm smile. He was accompanied by his wife, a quiet, elegant woman named Mariko. From the moment they arrived, Mr. Tanaka's gaze missed nothing. He observed the way Julian's hand rested on Amelia's back, the easy smile she gave him when he spoke, the seamless way they functioned as a team. Dinner was a resounding success. The conversation guided by Julian was engaging. Amelia, speaking about her passion for design, charmed both Mr. Tanaka and his wife. She noticed Mariko looking at the centerpiece, a stunning arrangement of white orchids and black river stones. "This is beautiful," Mariko said in quiet, accented English. "It has such harmony. Did you create it?" I did, Amelia replied with a smile. I've always believed that flowers have a language of their own. Later, as Julian and Mr. Tanaka retired to the study to discuss business, Amelia sat with Mariko in the living room. Your husband, Mariko said, her eyes twinkling. He is a very brilliant man, but I have met many brilliant men. Their minds are always working, always calculating. It is rare to see one with a quiet heart. She looked pointedly at Amelia. You quiet his heart. Amelia was taken aback by the observation. He is a very special man. A marriage, a real one, is not about perfection, Mariko continued gently as if sharing a great secret. It is about two imperfect people who find a perfect way to be together. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. That is not in any business contract. Amelia's breath hitched. Had their acting been that good? Or was it no longer acting at all? The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The evening ended with handshakes and promises of future meetings. The merger seemed all but guaranteed. After their guests had departed, a quiet energy remained in the vast penthouse. Well, Mrs. Devereaux, Julian said, loosening his tie as he walked towards her, you were magnificent. You weren't so bad yourself, Mr. Devereaux, she replied, a genuine smile on her face. The formalities of their names now felt like an inside joke. Mr. Tanaka was incredibly impressed, not just with the business projections, but with this. He gestured around the room at the lingering perfection of the evening. With us. He told me he understands now why I kept our marriage a secret. He said, some treasures are too precious for the marketplace. They stood close, the adrenaline of the evening slowly fading, leaving something else in its place. A comfortable, charged silence. Mariko said something to me, Amelia confessed in a low voice. She said she could see the way you look at me when you think no one is watching. Julian's gaze intensified. He took a step closer, closing the small gap between them. And what do you see, Amelia? He asked, his voice a low murmur. When you look at me. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She was looking at a man who had rescued her, challenged her, and believed in her. A man she was supposed to be deceiving, but who had somehow become the most honest part of her life. I see you, she whispered. He lifted his hand, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with an agonizing slowness. His touch was electric, a current that ran through her entire body. All the unspoken words, all the stolen glances, all the moments where the line between role-playing and reality had vanished, it all culminated in this single breathless moment. His head lowered, his lips just inches from hers. The no intimacy clause was a distant, forgotten rule from a different lifetime. She could feel his breath, see the conflict and desire warring in his twilight eyes. Her own eyes fluttered shut. She was no longer acting. This was real. And then his phone buzzed. The sound was jarring, an unwelcome intrusion from the outside world. They both flinched, breaking the spell. Julian pulled his hand back, stepping away as he glanced at the screen. The transformation was instantaneous. The soft, vulnerable man was gone, replaced by the calculating CEO. It's Harrison, he said, his voice strained. There's a problem. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, a sudden chill sweeping through her. The moment was gone, shattered. What is it? Julian's face was grim as he read the message. It's Beatrice Vance. She's publishing a story tomorrow morning. The headline is, The Billionaire's Bogus Bride. How Amelia Rosewood Fooled the City. She claims to have an inside source, a sworn affidavit from someone close to the situation, proving our marriage is a complete fraud. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. An inside source. Who could it be? Julian's eyes met hers, and in them she saw a cold, hard certainty. There's only one person who would be this desperate, this malicious. Mark, she breathed. The contract, the merger, their carefully built world, it was all about to come crashing down. And this time Amelia feared not for her business or her reputation, but for the loss of something far more valuable, something she hadn't even realized she had, until the moment she was about to lose it. Julian. The morning after their perfect evening, the city awoke to Beatrice Vance's poison pen. Her front-page article, "The Billionaire's Bogus Bride," was a vicious assault on their story. It painted Amelia as a desperate fraud, citing a sworn affidavit from a source close to Mark Sterling that proved the marriage was a sham. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, now felt like a war room. Amelia paced the words on the screen, blurring through her panicked tears. Julian, however, was a statue of cold fury, his eyes fixed on the city below as he spoke to his legal team. "It's over, isn't it?" Amelia whispered when he hung up. "He won." "No," Julian said, his voice deadly calm. He turned from the window, his gaze locking with hers. "This is no longer about a merger. He came after you. Now I'm coming for him." The fight was no longer business. It was personal. "We're going to the symphony ball tonight. Beatrice, Chloe, and Mark will all be there waiting for us to hide. We're not going to hide. We're going to end this." That evening the air was thick with the tension of an impending battle. As Amelia finished getting ready in a simple but elegant midnight blue gown, Julian met her. He wasn't empty-handed. He held a small velvet box. "Our story is that we never exchanged proper rings," he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond wedding band. "It's time we corrected that." His voice was low and steady as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Now," he murmured, his eyes holding hers, "it's real." Their arrival at the symphony hall silenced the room. A storm of whispers and camera flashes followed them as they walked directly toward the center of the floor where Mark, Chloe, and Beatrice stood like a coven of triumphant vultures. Mark's face split into a smug grin as he started towards them, ready for a public confrontation. But Julian was faster. With a quiet word to the event organizer, a single chime silenced the hall. All eyes turned to him. "Good evening." Julian's voice resonated through the space, calm and commanding. "I apologize for the interruption. My wife and I would like to address the creative fiction many of you read this morning." His gaze swept the room, landing like a physical blow on Mark. "It seems Mr. Mark Sterling has been particularly imaginative." Mark froze, the color draining from his face. "He has accused my wife of fraud," Julian continued, his voice turning to ice. "So let's talk about real fraud. Let's talk about Sterling Development Group, a company that has been using investor funds from a new housing project to cover massive undisclosed losses. A company whose books are so fraudulent, I'm sure the SEC will be fascinated to see the full report my accounting division is sending them in the morning." A collective gasp swept the ballroom. Chloe stared at Mark in horror. He was ruined, and he knew it. Julian dismissed him with a final contemptuous look. He turned to Amelia, his expression softening as he gently touched her cheek. His voice now loud enough for everyone to hear. "My wife is the most honest and talented person I have ever known. Her only mistake was once believing in a man completely unworthy of her. His foolishness was my great fortune." He looked directly at her, the entire room and its drama fading away, until it was just the two of them. "I love you, Amelia Devereaux," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that was raw and undeniable. "And that is the only truth that matters." Before she could react, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a performance. It was a deep, passionate kiss filled with every unspoken word and stolen glance, sealing their story not as a contract, but as a promise. The room erupted into applause, a thunderous confirmation of their victory. Mark Sterling stood alone in the silence of his own destruction, a ghost at a feast that was no longer his. The weeks following the symphony ball were a blur of victories. The Matsumoto merger was signed with celebratory toasts, and Mark Sterling's empire crumbled into dust under the weight of his own deceit. The contract, the reason for their elaborate charade, was now fulfilled. One evening, Amelia and Julian stood on the penthouse balcony, the silence between them heavier than it had ever been. The 2 months were up. The game was over. Was it all just part of the show? Julian?" Amelia asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper against the city breeze. "What you said at the ball was that the grand finale to the performance." Julian turned to her, his face serious in the twilight. "The show was about destroying Mark and protecting you. That was the plan. But what I said, that was for me. And for you." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "This arrangement started as a means to an end, Amelia. But somewhere between the fake smiles and the shared secrets, it became the most real thing in my life. You made this empty apartment a home. You made me better." Before she could respond, he pulled the thick legal contract from his jacket pocket. "This document is what brought us together," he said, his voice low and certain. He then ripped it cleanly in half, then again letting the pieces fall from his hand. "But it's not what will keep us together." He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "I don't want to follow an exit strategy, Amelia. I want to start a real beginning. Forget the contract. Be my wife for real." Tears of pure joy streamed down Amelia's face. All the fear, all the uncertainty washed away in that one perfect moment. She threw her arms around his neck, her answer a sobbed, "Yes." He held her close as the city glittered below, no longer a stage for their deception, but a witness to their truth. What began as a lie to fool the world had ended with a love that was truer than anything they had ever known. And so Amelia's story, which began in a moment of bitter humiliation, found its true beginning in a declaration of love under the city lights. Her journey reminds us that sometimes our lowest points are just a setup for our greatest comeback. It shows that true worth isn't measured by the names we carry or the money in our bank accounts, but by the strength of our character and the courage to take a chance, even when it seems insane. She and Julian started with a lie to fool the world, but they ended up finding their most honest selves in each other. If you were moved by Amelia's journey from heartbreak to triumph, please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it, and share this video with someone who loves a story of love and sweet revenge. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another dramatic story that proves life is truly stranger and more beautiful than fiction. Thank you for listening.